Hey everyone, it's Simon here from High Plane Games. I hope you're well and having a great day. Today I want to talk about the Formula E race that took place over the weekend, where it was sim racers and real life drivers from Formula E getting together to have like a virtual E-Prix championship around the fictitious Vegas circuit using R-Factor 2 and how it went. I personally thought that it was a really ambitious project to put a $1 million prize bucket together for a single race to try and showcase what the best thing about sim racing is and to try and give us a little bit of love, essentially, in the community. Now, with the best intentions in the world, it turned into a little bit of a farce and really came across as a really disconnected and confused thing where it didn't quite know what it wanted to be. And at the core of it was the issue that where it didn't know what it wanted to be, it focused its attention on all of the wrong things to try and highlight what a virtual championship could and should look like in the future. But I'm going to go through some of the bits and bobs first, and then I'll try and go through some things that I would like to see improved in the future. And if there's any way that I can help Formula E look at doing this in the future, then I'm most happy to get involved. I doubt anyone will be watching, but we'll see how we go. So initially the thing is all kicked off on R-Factor 2, which is a very worthy and easy enough game to set up for in theory. However, the actual game itself was a pre-Steam installation, which I can kind of see why they went for that. But what that did mean was that some stuff is out of date. It was running on a mod that seemed to have some weird tinkers with it, and it didn't like being played with, as you'll find out with the results. And the graphics were turned down to a point where it looked like textures hadn't been loaded properly and the whole thing looked quite ugly. Now, in theory, that shouldn't necessarily work because it's showcasing the thing to the world, but if you're looking at showcasing something for the very first time, it needs to be putting its best step forward, and at least upping the graphical ante a little bit would have been most welcome. The circuit itself, from what it looked like and from what I hear, was in beta, and not necessarily a fully finished and fully fleshed out track. And it certainly showed, because it was a track that didn't lend itself well to overtaking or showcasing really the best of what sim racing is all about: crazy but great online racing. And we saw very little of that and very little action. And what action we did see ended up in the barriers. And again, that did not showcase the best thing for sim racing in general. And it wasn't necessarily the real life drivers who I thought might not really take it seriously, and I was really pleased that actually they did, mainly because they were probably getting paid. But Felix Rosenquist specifically was an absolute star out there, getting second by the end. And he's no stranger to sim racing, so it kind of was good to see that people do bridge the gap, and that was a definite positive for me. But yeah, not only were the graphics turned down, but there was also marred heavily with technicality problems. So Jerome D'Ambrosio couldn't start because his rig didn't work, so that was one down before we even got going. There was then further issues where the fan boost element that had been added on to the mod basically stuck on for a driver, and he was lapping 2 seconds faster than anyone had ever done, and as a result went on to win the race. But after owning up to the fact that his car had a 2-second advantage, which was very good for Ollie to do so, the win was then handed over to Bono Huis, who I've had the pleasure of racing and commentating with before. Very nice guy, came along, took the crown. But the issue that you had was, by the end of it, I had no clue who Bono Huis was, if I didn't already know him, obviously. And to an outside audience, this is the big key and the big issue that I have with the whole thing, was that it was personalityless because it didn't know what it wanted to sell or what it wanted to be. No drivers had any profiles. I didn't know them from Adam. If I was an outsider looking in, I wouldn't care who this Bono Huis was. He's just run the race. I wouldn't care if people continuously said that Gregor Houtu was the best sim racer known to man, because I don't know what he's won, and I don't understand in the context of what he's won why that's important and why it's better than what anyone else has done, and how actually that is quite subjective anyway. And then the sim racers themselves seemed to be on some kind of anti-press, anti-personality thing that was going on. No one wanted to speak, everyone was dry, and no one put their best foot forward. And in front of what was a captive audience of lots of sim racers who are tuned in to understand and know these people and want to follow them, to outside people thinking, I'm quite interested in this, but I wonder what's in it for me. No one came out of that amiable. And that is a big issue. If you've got no one to cheer on, why would you continue coming back for more? And the whole thing about coming back for more is indicative of all of the issues and comments and suggestions that I have for the future. So, there were no driver profiles, so I have no idea who any of them are. I don't understand why there were teams in a one-off race. I get that it's a good way to shoe in a sponsor, but there we go. Sim racers wearing overalls, I get that it's for the good look and feel of things and to show off some sponsors again, but they're like tying them around their waist and acting like they're out on track for fireproofs. Looks a bit strange. Doesn't really bother me too much, but it needs to have a purpose. Same as the cringeworthy grid girl that walks across the studio before the race was just awkward and awful. And whilst the ESPN styled really high energy and lovely studio setting was great, it then looks really weird when you switch to a game that seems to be running on minimum graphics wherever possible, because it just gives a disconnect. And then I don't understand why it's running on graphics. Is that really the best that the sim racing world can give me if I've never bought a sim racing game or don't understand that it's running on no graphics? If I'm in a pit stop and no pit crew come out, which is what they had turned on for that specific R Factor 2 thing, why am I looking at a car that is stationary for 15 seconds when I don't understand that being stationary for 15 seconds is not a game fault. It is genuinely how the pit stop works in this game. Because again, I just wouldn't know if I'm not a sim racer. And that was the issue. Who is your audience? Who are you going for? Who are you trying to market? And more crucially, what are you trying to market? Because it felt like, to me, that it was Formula E being marketed to some sim racers rather than we're trying to market to Formula E viewers a sim racing championship that you can also get on board with and maybe interact with in some way. If I wanted to get involved in sim racing, there was nowhere that I could go for more information. There was no additional thoughts or feelings about where to start or what to do. There was nothing on the technology that people were using, so I wouldn't know what wheels to go for, or if I wanted to go and buy a rig, what kind of things was they using? It seemed really short-sighted, and so in that way it felt like a ginormous $1 million one-off that will never be repeated so long as it shall live, because there is no follow-through and no follow-on. Audience, especially with Formula E, the way how it's structured as well, it's already preying on audiences who have short attention spans because they don't want to watch long races, that want to be involved with fan booths because they want to do social media stuff. They need to be able to keep that captive audience interested in the short term. So if I was a sim racer, can I download the Formula E track and mod? Can we all put in a hot lap competition together? It doesn't need to anything, but it keeps my audience entertained and ongoing in the future until we look at whether or not we want to do another virtual race in the future. So there was a lot of things like that. And yes, Formula E was pushed as a concept and as a thing, but as sim racers, we're most likely already going to know about Formula E. So we're already a captive audience, so I'm a bit confused as to where it wants to go long term here. In the future, how are you going to decide what 10 sim racers stick around if you're going to do like a multiple championship, and how that works? If it works at all. Graphically, are you going to look at how you structure your cameras in the future for the race? Because what it did do was try and take advantage of the fact that it was actually running in a game. So doing cameras that you wouldn't necessarily see, and game cameras, like driving behind like we're doing here with our little HRT and Mr. Carthaginian driving around. that's all very well and good, but actually when you're looking at sim racing and you look at the broadcasts that go on, having been a part of broadcasts for almost a decade now, we look at how we try and make things as realistic as possible by using trackside cameras, by not doing weird things like that. And if we're going to do anything that's on board that's swinging around everywhere, you do it almost like a GoPro so that it spins around on a 360 stand. So yeah, less swingman please would be great, but that's very much a personal thing, I think. No matter how many people may say one way or another. But yeah, but it just harked of its heart's in the right place, but it was doing the wrong things. So yeah, did you watch the Formula E race in Vegas? Who do you think came out of it well? Because I don't think anyone apart from those that got paid came out of it very well, and that was financially. I don't think the sim racing community particularly endeared itself by the way how it behaved seemingly in the chat, by being quite openly negative and disgusted. They're taking a risk, Formula E, but it's up to us to make sure as a community that we bond together, and instead of doing our usual insular shit, by actually we sit and help and give suggestions and ways how it can improve and be better. And not just be so, well that was terrible, I shall tweet about it, I will Facebook about it till the end of time, and put everyone else going for it. If it's going to be a starting point, it's down to us as a community to make sure that we forge ahead and make sure that we make it the best that we can. Because like it or not, if that stays around, that's going to end up being potentially the biggest platform for where how sim racing is shown and understood. And we need to make sure that that's putting the best foot forward for our community, because people are only going to osmose in if they do like it and take on board, and they're going to think that whatever we show there is exactly how the sim racing community is. Who's going to want to join someone or a community that is that horribly negative? So thank you so much for watching this minor moan, but I hope that it was positive in the future. One last thing that I forgot to mention, I was just quickly looking down some of my lists of points. Damage. If you're going to put damage on a car, can you at least make sure that if they're flipping over barriers or losing front wings, that they actually do go slower, because there were some people that were staying out and going faster because they'd knocked some of their front wing off, which does occasionally happen in real life, but not very often and not to most of the field. So yeah, that would be a great fix for the future too. But yeah, interesting start, needs some major tweaks for it to work. And if you're looking for anyone to get involved with Formula E, I'm more than happy to put my services and my time and my effort to you to make sure that it becomes a wee bit more of a success in the future. Take care, thank you very much for watching everyone, and stay tuned every day. There's a video here on Higher Plane Games. That car looks second hand, and it's surprisingly not going as fast as everyone else. Even Formula Race Stars gets it right. Bye for now.